Today on Inspired Money.
You can be unconscious and only care about the financial part and nothing else. Or you can see the financial part as a driver for innovation, creativity, improvement of society, improvement of people's lives. And that view of business is the one that I choose to immerse myself in.
This is episode 104 with author of The Clean Money Revolution, Joel Salaman. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If it's your first time listening, welcome. Do you want to live a richer life, make a greater impact, and make the world a better place? Today's guest is Joel Salaman, and he wants you to do all of the above. He's the author of the book, The Clean Money Revolution, Reinventing Power, Purpose, and Capitalism. He's also the chairman of Renewal Funds, a mission venture capital firm where he's invested in over 100 early growth stage companies with the goal of achieving strong returns and catalyzing positive social and environmental change. I really want to explore Joel's relationship with money today, because for him, his relationship with it changed dramatically over time. And I hope that this episode will make you think about your relationship with money and how you might very deliberately use your money for good. In this episode, you'll learn about Joel's shift from a negative to positive relationship with money, the long-term importance of aligning your investing with your values, and we'll learn about ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance investing, and how your desired legacy can shape your priorities. Now, let's get inspired with Joel Salaman. Joel, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Almost as excited as me, maybe.
All right. Well, let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, I did get the piggy bank. I was given a piggy bank. This is the 1950s. We were just coming out of the post-World War II Industrial Revolution. I grew up in a family that included the child of an immigrant who became a classic entrepreneur story, Jews in the south of the United States, Chattanooga, Tennessee. My mother came from Chicago, moved to the south during that era. I think that my family were classic, two different generations of immigrants, but work your way up, work hard, be good citizens, and the piggy bank and opening a bank account was part of my early upbringing.
Sounds like solid lessons early.
Pretty basic ones, I think, but they were good ones, and I got taught a bit steadily, I guess, a bit here and there about the value and importance of money and some of the basics of how to think about it, how you get it, where it is, things like that. And for a lot of years, I just rolled with it like other kids do and wanted to see my bank account grow, things like that. And took a while into teen years that I started to question things in different ways.
Yes, I want to dig into that. Your parents were both entrepreneurs, but I read in your book that there was a time when you did not even want to talk about money at all. Can you talk about your changing relationship with money over the years?
So in the beginning, I guess I was trying to describe so-called normal childhood. I learned what it is. I realized it takes money to do some things that I think I want to do. And so I didn't think much about it, except how do I get some and how do I get to use it? As the 60s began to unfold, I'm in my early teens to late teens, and I'm seeing a lot more about the questioning of capitalism and what was the Vietnam War about? Was that actually a money war? Was that really about something ideological? And I lived in a family that thought about these things, cared about them, and were always very civically engaged. So then there's Jim Crow in the South and civil rights and the era of seeing effectively systemic oppression that took a long time even for me to grasp all of that. But I was living in the midst of it, seeing things that caused me to ask questions. As I got interested in these global affairs more and started paying attention, because my family was also political, believed that that was important not to ignore and important to be involved, to influence the world that is going to affect you and everything you choose to do. That caused me to think a lot about how does this world all fit together. We were at the very, very early stages of the ecology movement, the early days of organizations like Greenpeace and probably Sierra Club a little bit before that. But I started to see the connections between money and the way the world worked. Capitalism as a driver of a certain kind of success aspiration, and the fact that you could go out with your dream, work hard, be smart, and you could accumulate money. And on the other hand, where was the fairness in the system, and how was the overall access to these same things being distributed in society, and those kinds of questions. So I moved into a much more negative questioning about money and the fact that wars started over money and basic history. So I went through a rejection period. How do you reject money? Well, I ended up living in a remote location to test out being as simple as I could and reuse things, and whether they were mine or from the free store, that kind of thing. Learn to grow food and forage, understand where it comes from, how do you take care of basic needs, and how could I live outside the money system? Well, it was a good experiment. I didn't make myself very happy in it. Gradually, I realized that was not going to be the pathway, but it was good to kind of test the dimensions. And skipping forward, as I became an adult, my family had some success. I inherited some money, relatively modest in the scale of money, but relative to not having money, very, very important. And the first things I did early on were to support entrepreneurial undertakings that I was excited and inspired by, that aligned with things that seemed to me to matter. So that was the beginning of a long career that gradually got clearer and clearer about the fact that money is a very powerful substance. Finance and business as tools around money. You can make a lot of things happen, be very creative, and cause dreams to unfold, solving all kinds of problems and challenges. The other side was always there as well. Who has it? What are the ground rules? Why do I get some? Why do other people not get it? And how does all of that socioeconomic, political system work? And it got me pushed further and further towards finding the entrepreneurs and the companies that were actually creating products and services that matter to the larger well-being of ecology and society by entrepreneurs who truly care. Because I think that formula should be crucial and basic to the whole nature of business, economy, and money.
It sounds like you would have had an opportunity to take over your family business at some point, but it sounds like that did not align with, the direction that you wanted to go or were going in.
My family had gotten into the shopping mall business based in the South, and they'd been quite successful with it. They merged with a New York company that actually moved its headquarters to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which was unheard of at the time. And they had a basic model, which is find where the highway intersections were going to bring the most traffic, find anchor department stores, big department stores to put in, and then the small stores would come around them. They didn't really consider, or did they consider it their challenge, the fact of the societal change that happened from downtown centralized cities to suburban sprawl and shopping centers and shopping malls, which allowed humans to build across the landscape. And so ecological issues began to come clearer to me. And there was a kind of confusing part about was this good or bad? The kind of commodification and making alike across the landscape, the same stores, the same products, the same advertising, that kind of thing. And what was suburban sprawl all about? That era of the late 60s and early 70s caused me to think that I wanted to do something different. And it took a while before I ran into the concepts that said you can actually remake the idea of business, the idea of money around what your deepest beliefs and values are, and that you can actually make careers out of that and make a good life. So I got involved with the early stages of those entrepreneurs that were seeing business as a tool to push forward things that they believed in.
If you can take us back to the time where you did inherit a small amount of money, and you talked about seeking out entrepreneurs who care. You did make some early investments. I know one in Stonyfield. And can you talk a little bit about your experience at that time and how that was shaping you?
Part of the asking questions about these topics and actually having serious intellectual curiosity about it and attempting to understand what's good, what's bad, who am I, how do I engage with all this, and what do I want my contribution to be when I look back from my deathbed. A lot started when I was diagnosed with a genetic kidney disease that my father's lineage carried, and I was told that it could progress rapidly, I could die soon, I could live longer, and that I couldn't really affect it. And this was a great stimulus for me because I began to think about this kidney condition. What does the kidney do in the body? We don't really love to try to think about how's our body working and what's our effect on it, but we're getting more mature that way as a species, I think. But so I began to read ingredient labels. I knew that the kidney was filtering the blood. I thought about, why would I eat things that are going to cause more damage to my kidney? Might I live longer and be happier if I didn't? So I became a label reader, and then my first investments led me towards companies like Stonyfield Yogurt. At the time, it was a not-for-profit that was attempting to bring forth the idea that small family farms mattered and could be very important to society, and that these guys wanted to prove that through a not-for-profit. They had 5 cows. They started making yogurt that didn't exist really other than at a family scale in North America, which was based on natural yogurt that did not have additives, chemicals, all kinds of things in it. And it was enormously successful, and it took off. But early on, I made a $25,000 loan to the not-for-profit so that it could buy a couple more cows. And before they cashed the check, I got a phone call from one of the founders, Gary Hirschberg, saying, "We're never going to make it as a not-for-profit. We need this to be a for-profit. Would you become an investor instead of a lender?" And I agreed to that. And I was very lucky, the way these things work out, to have invested in what became a very successful company.
Yeah, it's really amazing to think back to a time when Stonyfield was 5 cows, because I think now it's hundreds of family farms, thousands of organic cows, and over 200,000 organic acres.
And it has affected the face of an entire industry, the dairy industry. It has been part of raising consciousness about soil and its importance, that it is a limited commodity. We have to treat it preciously, that it has major connections to climate, to human health, ecological well-being. And that was part of the beginning of an era where we humans began connecting the actual larger impacts and influences, a whole ecosystem of what we did in business. And from Stonyfield, I was fortunate to get connected to an early network called the Social Venture Network, which had been a gathering of fairly eccentric entrepreneurs, investors, and a variety of other kinds of characters thinking about the bigger pictures and the meaning of life and what's our responsibility as entrepreneurs and citizens and this kind of thing. It was a very fertile laboratory of the mid-'80s on through to the '90s and today. Out of Social Venture Network, many societal influences and business influences came that were raising the questions of how do we do better and how can this powerful tool of finance, business, and money be used to make the world that we believe has long-term value and can hold together for future generations. That opened a doorway to many other doorways and leads me today to be managing substantial resources along with my partners in investing in more of this kind of forward thinking with business.
You almost went through this soul-searching adventure where you started having this negative questioning of money. And it sounds like through things like the Social Venture Network, it started opening your eyes to using money in a positive way. Can you tell us today, how do you define money? How do you see money?
Money is an incredibly powerful tool. And like many tools and most tools, the user of the tool has a huge influence on whether that tool is constructive, positive, and does something important for society and that which supports society, which is ecology. And that concept alone was fairly new. Most people were going into businesses for very practical reasons to survive, thrive, take care of families, have a good roof over their heads, and become comfortable and feel that there were savings and that they could be buffeted from the ups and downs of larger forces than ourselves. I think a lot of things like business and money are fairly neutral. Now, there are inherent structural aspects to this, but I'm going to stay a little simpler here and just say they're fairly neutral. You can be unconscious and only care about the financial part and nothing else, or you can see the financial part as a driver for innovation, creativity, improvement of society, improvement of people's lives. And that view of business is the one that I choose to immerse myself in.
Coming up, we talk ESG and impact investing, getting started, legacy, and more. But first, here's something to think about. How much money do we really need?
Standards and the bar raise constantly. And I believe that's our responsibility as thoughtful, caring humans, that we constantly learn and advance our ability to do good and to be a positive force in the world. If we all took that attitude, all the brilliant entrepreneurs, and we started to ask questions of ourselves of topics like, how much money will be enough for me? How much influence? Which is the more important, sheer volume of money or influence that money can create, which requires a kind of a deeper analysis and a set of choices for who we want to be and how we want to be as humans. But that trajectory led me into really considering that money is a responsibility, and it's a responsibility to do good in the world for the future of humanity and stable ecology. With that attitude, the power of these tools can become very magnificent. See a problem in the world, use the tools of business and capital to create important solutions to that.
The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/104. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check the show notes if you want to learn more about Joel or things mentioned in this episode. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. They say that by aligning your finances with who you are, you can take control of your money and make it easier to maintain control. Since Joel posed the question, how much money will be enough for me? It got me thinking about needs versus wants. Money's one thing, but how much do we need? This requires you to take inventory. Look at everything that you have. Chances are that you're exceeding your basic needs in many areas. Take the time to reflect and practice gratitude. Appreciate your relationships and experiences because most of the time, they're much more interesting and valuable than material things. In today's digital world, things just move so quickly. Whether you're considering buying a new pair of shoes or dining out, slow it down. Stores love it when we make impulse buys. Don't be spontaneous in this case. Instead, take your time. Take a couple of days to think about it, and then come back if needed. Another thing that you might do is practice one in, one out. That means that if you do buy a pair of new shoes, you have to retire an old one. So be thoughtful about what you want versus what you need, and take the time to slow down and really think about it. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. That's RUNNYMEDE, Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. What's your biggest financial challenge right now? Do you have a money question? If you need help, go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy to email me, or you can even schedule a 15-minute call at inspiredmoney.fm/15. It doesn't have to be about money. We can talk about this podcast. We can talk about anything. I'd love to hear from you. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong. You had a unique opportunity to deploy some of your own funds, your inheritance, and then you also were able to work with some much higher net worth individuals to test these ideas because you were a pretty early adopter in wanting to affect positive social change through your money. Can you talk a little bit about the testing that you did to really test this idea and put it into practice?
Absolutely. So first there was just my own testing and sitting at the knees of smart, creative people and watching a lot of things unfold. But when I was given the opportunity by an extraordinary woman named Carol Newell, who I met through circles that were thinking about these topics, she inherited a very substantial amount of money, and she invited me to lead the implementation and deployment of the majority of her wealth into today's challenges while leaving her with a substantial amount of wealth to go forward with. But she understood or had the attitude that that money was almost like a planetary resource and trust that circumstances had led her to have control of. So she wanted to see it work on societal challenges today. And the opportunity to deploy what turned into a number of tens of millions of dollars focused in a region on long-term well-being and sustainability of society, ecology, and human interaction gave me an unbelievable opportunity to leap into the creativity and passion of entrepreneurship, both for-profit and not-for-profit, and both support individual companies, but also convenings and infrastructures and organizations to support a culture of positive use of business and money for other kinds of purposes like not-for-profits, influencing politics, and helping address challenges and issues of society with whatever tools could do that. The concept that money and business are these powerful tools and that we can choose to use them to make the world better while also creating prosperity and abundance is extraordinary. And so I had that opportunity and learned so much through it. And out of that grew our current Mission Venture Capital Investment Fund.
Joel, were you always investing in early growth stage?
Pretty much. That's the area that I find the most interesting, challenging, and has a lot of opportunity to influence long-term outcomes. Big companies have a lot of power, but they're not easy to both gain control of or drive in entrepreneurial ways. It can be done. But in the early stage entrepreneur world, we are in an alchemical process where choices that get made can very rapidly today turn into shifting significant issues on the planet, be they having to do with healthcare, with housing, transportation, climate and energy issues, and the well-being of people. We've got a long, long way to go to make that more fair and balanced and cleaner and create a safe world given the conditions of human population and our demands on a limited resource planet. But it is this very creativity and possibility which makes it so exciting. And I know that today there is an explosion of entrepreneurship that is taking on many, many challenges of society. I'm so excited to be part of it.
Can you define ESG and impact investing for us?
The point here is to have our money do less harm and more good. If we make that clear choice and we stay involved enough with where do we bank, where do we save, where do we purchase, how do we invest, these choices have ramifications that deserve our full spectrum of attention. We need to include the ethical and the moral and our point of view and worldview about what we think future generations should have for them. We are the ancestors of what comes next, bloodlines or not. I believe that this is the grand creativity of the times to steer all of this to a long-term view that creates a safe, clean, fair future that we can all deal with together on this planet.
You said a desire to have our money do less harm and to do more good. Clearly, the title of your book, The Clean Money Revolution, and I love the tagline, Reinventing Power, Purpose, and Capitalism. Is it binary? Is it clean money versus dirty money?
Oh, I wish it were that simple. But as a communicator, you know that we have a vast but also limited ability to say things in a simple way that can convey. I think clean money is intended as a provocation. What do you think is clean money? Do you care? Your name is on your money. I think that's a legitimate understanding that someday current technologies are going to have our great-grandchildren able to see where money came from before it got to us and where it goes after we make choices with it. So I consider this of the deepest spiritual dimension as well as pragmatic. Money is a very esoteric substance. I mean, it's a piece of paper at some level, and we infuse all kinds of power in it. We need to get closer to that understanding and feel the responsibility. There are people and places affected by where my money is and what it's doing right this minute while we talk. I want to do the best that I can to have that align with what I believe in and care about, and I think we all should.
Joel, where does one start as an investor? Does it require some time to be introspective and identify and write down one's values and what you want to stand for?
I believe it's essential. I think knowing who we are, what matters, what we're going to prioritize, and what we're going to leave when we look back from our deathbeds should include not only how we were as a husband, as a child, as a citizen, but what actions and what responsibility did we take, and how did we use choices about money in a way that represents our deepest values and belief systems about the world. Waking up to that is what our chance is for a soft landing for civilization as we grow in population, as we grow in our influence on the world around us, and as we grow in our responsibility for what will come multiple generations after us. I think that's one of the secrets to being a responsible human being.
So as founding partner at Renewal Funds, I mean, traditionally, we're evaluating companies to invest in by their profitability, barriers to entry, the management. Do you have a discipline for evaluating a company's mission, ethics, and impact?
The simple form is it about products and services that actually matter to the larger challenges of humanity and society. Second, are the entrepreneurs people who truly care about these topics we're on? So the starting place is a subjective judgment that one has to learn from instinct and experience in the world. Quantifying and turning into a science what is positive impact and what's not is also an important exercise, but an imperfect one. At the end of the day, we're going to make judgment calls about our belief systems. And our belief systems can be agnostic, and we don't pay any attention to them, and we're just looking at the bottom line. That thinking must change. There are more bottom lines, and responsibility for those multiple bottom lines is something that as citizens we need to help see that the regulator of the commons, called government, is actually as good and as potent and as clear-minded about the long-term future as the best that humans can be. And we also, as investors, need to find our way to quantify what we believe is proper impact. This is not a perfect science, the same as the ethics of us as a human being or as groups of individuals is also subjective. The point is to apply our wisdom and our intention and our deepest understandings to represent all the actions that we do with money and business in such a way that we can look back from our deathbed and know that we did everything we could do to make a better world for what comes after us.
Yeah, so a big motivation is legacy. And I think in the past, one would kind of look at business or being a do-gooder. You're saying that we can all do both.
We have to do both.
With all the companies that you've evaluated and you've invested in, how have your belief systems changed with your experience?
Well, first of all, with time and age and all the challenges that come up, they have become far more pragmatic and nuanced. None of this is simple, and there are just sheer judgment calls to make and preferences to do. But this is what defines us as human beings. What do we choose to focus on? Where do we make our values, ethics, morals consistent? How do we do that? Why do we do that? Does it matter? And I believe that if we begin asking those questions sincerely as we can, first there's going to be survival. Take care of being sure I can put a roof over my family's head, I can feed them, I can take care of basics as a human being. That's one vast area of subject matter to talk about here. But we're actually in this kind of more elite subject area of entrepreneurship, business, and creating wealth. I think that gives us a higher and bigger responsibility to think these things through and have a point of view. We need to ask questions like, how much money is enough? What are we doing with that money once we have it? And what's our responsibility to this world that gave us the opportunity and to future generations? Crucial questions.
What's your answer to that for yourself?
My answer is that I have to do my very best to hold the long term, to hold the inner. What are my true values? I will either face some kind of judgment at the end of my life, or I will face how am I thought of by those people I most care about and the others that are affected by my life work. What's my responsibility, and how would I like to be thought of? That's motivation enough for me. I don't know how everyone else decides this, but I encourage to simple it down and know that the people that come after us, they're watching today what we as their ancestors, whether, again, bloodline or just metaphorically, what world we have left behind for them. And it is now that we have so much power of science and industry and money, we have a higher bar to meet, and we have a spiritual evolution that is probably necessary to help us grasp and take responsibility for these matters, because we're at a time where the future outlook has some very challenging issues that we humans have created, and we humans can solve them, and there's plenty of money to do that with.
You've mentioned ancestry and bloodlines a couple of times, and I recall that in your book, you were involved with an organization, I think it was Threshold. There was a Threshold board that once visited the Onondaga Reservation in central New York State. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacted you?
Discovery by those of us who find ourselves in the middle of modern society, the discovery that there were other points of view and ways of thinking and ways of being humans in the ecosystem of life faced different times, different challenges, and perhaps had more time to reflect on these matters, but had perspectives on the sanctity and sacredness of the very blessing of life itself and of the diversity and richness that this particular formulation called planet Earth has created, like a true Garden of Eden. Of course, with challenges and harshnesses and realities that are difficult, but to understand that our actions affect hundreds and hundreds of years into the future, and that the actions of those hundreds and hundreds of years before us, holding that kind of perspective of time and responsibility and stewardship, that was a part of all cultures in the beginning, I believe. You work for survival, you understand the systems that you depend upon, and you do your best to work with them in such a way that brings abundance and life-giving nourishment. You go from 1 million people on the planet towards 10 billion, which many listeners here will face in their lifetimes. And you have to get very sophisticated about how to do that. And looking back at earlier traditions and understandings of kind of broader sense of reality can provide very important lessons. So indigenous people around the planet, all of us were at one time indigenous. We were bound to a place, and we had to take responsibility for it at some level. We've developed a society that enables us to detach from that and assume someone else is taking care of it. So getting exposed at an early age, and particularly early in my business career, to a more indigenous point of view about the earth and why and how we're here really helped to broaden my view beyond a simply extractive, accumulative, self-aggrandizing version of it, to at least attempt to think about every action and how that affects everything else, potentially. That kind of ethic and exposure to it was crucial in developing my own point of view. And we live at a time where we can actually choose to immerse and find out more about other points of view and how people have dealt with this game of life.
Yeah, I find it interesting that some of the indigenous cultures, they give you a very different perspective on money, because you're going back to a time that was likely agricultural. And if you define wealth, it was defined by he who had water and irrigation, or he who could grow a bountiful crop. And you're correct. It's very much intertwined with a deep respect for the earth and for nature and for caring for it.
And I believe that this is why I like to talk about a new spirit, a next spiritual evolution, where we come to grasp the sanctity of all of this, the miracle that it exists, and that we are stewards. And that's a central responsibility, that we be sure that future generations have access to at least as good as we have, and preferably better.
I'm kind of hearing the 4 pillars, because there's physical health, and you mentioned the genetic disease that you had affecting your kidney. there's financial health, and there's mental health, and you've mentioned spiritual several times. So it sounds like really seeking a balance of those things.
That's right. And I want to say that my kidney disease gradually caused the deterioration of my kidneys, and a friend of mine gave me one of her kidneys about 14 years ago. And modern medicine, the miracle of modern medicine and science, actually gave me the capacity to be healthy and vigorous 15 years later.
Joel, as a pretty young guy, because you had that prognosis, it did light a fire under you because it forced you to prioritize what mattered to you because you didn't know how much time you had on this earth. How did having that second chance change or affect you?
Gratitude and responsibility and joy. I shifted from troubledness about these topics and kind of a sense of what can I really do? I'm not doing enough. How do I do more? To actually grasping the incredible, miraculous gift of life itself as now it's clear. Our job is to serve people and places and the future.
Joel, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
Well, I think that when you realize that you have clarity about the purpose of your life, if you can get that, I think success follows. And so you define success in the ways that are best to you, that are suited to you and your circumstance. I don't think there's one model of success, but joy, sense of purpose, and sense of direction are very powerful elements. Whatever you fill in those blanks with, we want to have the sense that our life matters and that we have purpose and that we can do something about it. Those of us with that privilege need to be aware of what a privilege it is and use it for what most matters most deeply to us.
Well, thank you for spending time with us today, sharing your personal story, and really giving us a lot to think about in how we can use money as a powerful force for good. Can you tell the Inspired Money listener where to follow you and learn more?
JoelSolomon.org is a personal website that has to do with my book and podcasts and speaking and sharing ideas around these topics. RenewalFunds.com is our investment business and can give you a sense of how what I've said has translated into the pragmatics of raising money from other people and going out and finding companies that represent the kinds of values and perspective that I've spoken about in this podcast.
That's great. Well, thank you for your positive impact, and I hope that our listeners will follow your lead.
Thank you for taking time and giving me this opportunity to speak to your listeners.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? For me, the takeaway here is about your money mindset. There was a time when Joel didn't even want to talk about money or deal with money. Today, he's focused on it. As a professional investor, his money mindset didn't just change. It made a 180-degree turnaround, a complete shift. He supports caring and mission-focused entrepreneurs who can have a positive impact on the world. I want you to take 5 minutes today to think about two things. First, write down your values. What are the things that matter to you? Then think about how you want to use your money. Investing, donating. See how your goals and objectives fit into this idea of clean money. And then second, I want you to think about what do you want your legacy to be? I think that this is something that we often don't think about, but as you heard today, it can really have a big impact. You don't have to have a genetic kidney disease. Think about what kind of impact do you want to have on this world once you're gone? Because you want to see if that long-term vision, it might shape some of your near-term decisions. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment and takeaway, let me know by posting in the private Inspired Money Makers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Have an inspired week, and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.